Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is David Zyla. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we're a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts and to educate the American people in the fine arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Following the conversation, we'll have a brief Q&A, so please feel free to use the chat or Q&A function for any questions that you may have. Today, I am extraordinarily pleased to introduce you to our very special guest, Samantha Berry. And let me tell you a little bit about Samantha as well as Glamour. So Glamour is one of the biggest women's brands in the world, reaching an all-time high of over 37 million people a month. Glamour believes in the power of women being themselves and stands with women as they do their own thing, honestly, authentically, and awesomely. Glamour is the ultimate authority for the next generation of change makers. And Samantha Berry is the editor-in-chief of Glamour, where she oversees content development and consumer experiences across the brand's digital, social, video, and print verticals. Under her leadership, Glamour emphasizes a digital-first focus on unique original reporting, exclusive features, and perspectives impacting women today across financial, interpersonal, fashion, beauty, wellness, and political topics. She has also strengthened Glamour's commitment to body positivity by showcasing size-inclusive brands and models across all channels. So I am going to introduce you to Samantha Berry.
Hi, everybody. David, thank you so much. And I'm so honored to be here. And as David said, please ask questions, because that's my favorite part of any of these chats, is to really dig into what you guys want to hear. But thanks for the amazing intro. I think we're here to talk about this baby that we're very, very, very proud of. And I just want to give a little bit of history of Women of the Year in particular, but also Glamour. Glamour's been around since 1939. And for those of you that aren't super familiar, Glamour was, such a progressive magazine from the get-go. Its tagline in the 40s was "for the girl with the job," which was so progressive. It was the first ever place to pay Andy Warhol a check when he used to do some sketches for Glamour when he arrived in New York. And it was the first magazine in America to put a Black woman on the cover in the 60s. It's always had this amazing history, and a big part of that history is Women of the Year, which has been around since 1990. And it was started by Ruth Whitney, legendary magazine editor. And as we started planning for the 30th anniversary, which was last year, a very different year than I suppose we all imagined, in preparation for that, it was Christmas 2019, and I wanted to prep for what that 30th year anniversary could and should look like for Glamour. And so I got a stack of every old issue of Glamour for Women of the Year, 30 years of it, and I read it on a plane back to Ireland, because that's where I grew up, for the Christmas holidays. And I remember being on the plane and going, this is so, I wasn't reading it as an editor-in-chief. I was reading it as somebody that was just so fascinated with these stories. And we came back in January 2020. And at the time Glamour's moved away from a print schedule, focusing really on digital and video and events. But we saw this massive opportunity, and everybody on the team did. We had an offsite with the Glamour team, and they saw this opportunity to put together this 30 years of celebrating women and put it together in a book. And we are so very, very proud of. This is the the cover of it, and it's actually a nod to the history of Glamour. So in the cover, the front and the back cover is all the different iterations of the Glamour logo over the years from 1939 to present day, and I think it is beautifully laid out. And it is 30 years of women who have reshaped the world. And in the book, what we wanted to do, and I'm going to take you through shortly some of the profiles of the women that we honored, but there's a couple of things that you should know about the book. It is, yes, absolutely celebrating the women that we have honored over the 30 years and really looking at when we honored them, what their journey has been ever since, and the amazing photography around Women of the Year that Glamour has done for 30 years. But it's also, we wanted to capture the magic of what happens in the room on the night. So usually we have an event, with the exception of last year because we couldn't have an in-person event. We have an event where we bring the honorees together, and we have people present them, and there's just moments of magic in the room. And we wanted to make sure we noted that in the book as well. And so throughout the book, what you will see is these amazing moments that happened on stage during the Women of the Year Awards, whether that was Chanel Miller's amazing poem 2 years ago, who is the Stanford rape survivor. She got up on stage in this amazing yellow dress and kind of reclaimed her spot in history, because we'd honored her 2 years previously as Jane Doe, when we didn't know her identity. There's moments where it's Reese Witherspoon talking about a very famous speech now from Glamour Women of the Year, where she talks about ambition not being a dirty word. There is moments from Maya Angelou to Solange Knowles. So we wanted to put that in the book. And then the third part of the book that was really important to us, at Condé Nast, Anna Wintour is my boss. And when we went and we talked about putting this book together, it was very important for her that there was service in it, that somebody, a young man or young woman, would pick up this book and they would find service in it, for themselves. And so in the book, we also have these kind of, how do you be an activist? How do you be a change maker? How do you be the Woman of the Year in your own life? And I think they're the three things that we hit throughout the book, and we're very, very proud of it. But I'm going to take you through some of just a tiny slice of the honorees that you will see. And they bridge the world of sports, politics, activism, fashion, which I know a lot of the people on this call are very interested in. So we sprinkled a lot of fashion in there. And I want to talk you through, first of all, why they were honored, and also what going back to them for this book looks like. So we honored Serena Williams in 2009, and she's just gone from strength to strength. Obviously, Serena Williams is she's got the nickname, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And what we've seen from Serena from very early days in covering her in Glamour right through to this year is that her star continues to shine, whether that is not only on the tennis court, but also in her activism and what she's doing. I think for us recently, she's been doing so much work around Black maternal health in America, and has been very vocal about that. And she's always amazing glamour woman. We had her husband, Alexis Ohanian, write a piece for us, I think last year, the year before, about how you can be a successful man but still realize your wife is always going to be much more successful than you, and celebrate her all the way. And I think you see in this image of Serena, it is, there's a lot of sports people in the book. Women in sports is a really important part for Glamour. And we are always advocating for sports women and equality. Megan Rapinoe's in the book as well, in an amazing shoot that we did next to the Statue of Liberty 2 years ago. And there's a very funny story where the Coast Guard were wondering why this boat with this amazing soccer star was getting so close to the Statue of Liberty. So that's Serena. Lots of sports people in the sports women in the book that we celebrate, from the basketball team in the 90s. I put this in. This is a personal favorite for me because I'm Irish. Mary Robinson was my absolute hero growing up, and Glamour honored her in 2005. And she, for those that aren't familiar, she was the president of Ireland and also the head of the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, and she both in this interview, but also in subsequent chats with her, she remembers being in the room that night for Wody, and also why human rights was really important to her, and she's always been something she'd celebrated. And it's interesting for me to go back to the story of Mary Robinson, because when I was growing up in Ireland, it was for most of my life, it was only female presidents. It was Mary Robinson, who was followed by Mary McAleese. And then to come to America and, really chat about politics with her audience, and understand that there's never been little girls in America that have ever grown up with anybody in Pennsylvania Avenue that was a woman leading the charge until recently, which we obviously have Kamala Harris as a VP. But I think you'll see a lot of politicians in the book as well, whether that's senators, whether that is Angela Merkel is in there. We've got a lot of global leaders in there. And I think you're seeing the next generation of female leaders globally, whether that's the New Zealand Prime Minister or the Finland, the head of Finland, who's a young woman. You're seeing kind of the next generation of female politicians around the world. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, Aman, I think this, first of all, we loved this. We honored her back in 2006. And I think what is interesting about her story is that she was very much the precursor to what we see in the world of fashion and style, where models and musicians have their name attached to beauty and style brands. And Iman, in the 90s, launched her beauty brand because she was on set and they didn't have the right foundation color for her. And I think it's an interesting, when you dig into Iman's story, both in the book and wider, how she really was the pioneer in indie beauty brands that were created with purpose. And for her, she talks in this piece about being on set and how it was this light bulb moment of the makeup artist didn't have the right shade for her skin, and she went about making it. So she's amazing. And there's a lot of beauty and style throughout the hundreds of pages. Tori Burch, we honored Tori Burch twice at Glamour Women of the Year in 2011 and 2010. And she is, this amazing American fashion designer, and, with these iconic pieces of footwear or bags or dresses. But in particular for us, Tori, in 2019, honoring her was less about her fashion brand and more about her philanthropic organization and the Tori Burch Foundation, and how she has, from the very get-go of being in business, been very dedicated to helping other women in business. And the Tori Burch Foundation is all about helping female entrepreneurs start businesses, get mentorship, get guidance. And I've seen the results of that in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And I think what the lovely thing about Tori is that the people that she has helped throughout the US, especially women in business. All right, let's go to the next one. I put this story in because I wasn't aware of the story personally until I read it. And it was one that has stayed with me ever since. It's Aura Lee Brown. It's one of the activists, the community activists that you'll see in the book. And this is the story of a woman who in her town wanted to see more of the kids around her going to university, and had noticed that they were dropping off after high school. And even if they had the grades to make it to university, that they didn't have the finance. And so she has made it her life mission, and it's still going. And it's one of the most inspirational stories in the book, to put dozens upon dozens of these kids to school, to university. And she's done it through saving her own money, but also fundraising. And I think Aura Lee Brown is this amazing example in the Glamour book of somebody that didn't seek out fame and fortune and global recognition, but the impact that she has had on this generation of teenagers in her town, and that that will continue to happen, is just one of definitely my favorite stories in the whole book. Veer Wang, amazing. Again, back to fashion. There's a lot of them in this book, and I think Vera Wang is. We honored her in 2003, and I think she has also paved the way for fashion becoming more lifestyle. She kind of was ahead of the game in that sense. So Vera Wang is, definitely, when you think about beautiful, brilliant bridal wear, but she also was she is a very savvy businesswoman. And back before it was the norm, started creating a lifestyle brand around her name, which included homeware and linens. And I think that you see lots more fashion houses and lifestyle brands kind of leaning into where Vera Wang had started. Let's go to the next one. Ashley Graham. This is Ashley Graham for us has always been a big part of the Glamour family. Body positivity and inclusiveness in style is super important to us. I think we've always been one of the female focused brands that has been shouting that from the rooftop, whether that is in her September cover 2 years ago, where it was about the next breed of supermodels, all over size 10. And I think it's important to us because, I mean, in America, in style, in America, 77% of women are over a size 12, I think, and they're represented by the smallest slice of imagery and clothes and retail and models and all of that. And I think there's a little bit of a tipping point, and Ashley Graham has definitely been part of that tipping point. We shot this, I think, in a beach in Florida, and I by all accounts, from the stories I've heard, the creative director was trying very, very hard not to get this leaked, because in a public beach doing a shoot that you are saving for a couple of months, when there's paparazzi and people on the beach, is a hard thing to contain. But they got away with it, and this was a beautiful shoot with Ashley, and she's always kind of taken part in a lot of Glamour Women of the Year events. DVF, I'm in Chelsea at the moment. Her DVF's iconic store and her home is down in Meatpacking, and she has always been a very inspirational fashion icon for the Glamour reader. And she tells this story about how when she was, I think, in her late 20s, early 30s, she was on a transatlantic flight, and the businessman sitting next to her asked her what a pretty young woman like her had she had the Wall Street Journal. And the reality is because she was on the front cover of the magazine, or on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. She has this iconic fashion labels, iconic wrap dress, but also I think one of the things that why we've honored her in the past, and we often do a lot with DVF, is she is really, again, leaning into what can I do more outside of the world of retail. And for her, it's about her mission of women in charge. She told me recently that there's one thing she does every day, which is introduce two people that have never met each other, and that she either introduces them on email or on a phone call, and because she wants to kind of pay it forward. And I think that was a lovely message that I took away from DVF. What is next? Chrissy Teigen. Chrissy Teigen was an honoree in 2019. And again, she's always been like open and honest and full of humor. And for us, we wanted to honor her because she did feel like, the US version of the People's Princess. Like, it's a very attainable, millions upon millions of people follow her, but they still feel like she's their, sister. She's got an approachable sense to her. And I remember very vividly Chrissy Teigen getting this award on the night of November 20, I think it was 2018 actually. And backstage with I was backstage with her husband, John Legend, and Hillary Clinton, who we were just about to bring on stage to talk about the midterms and politics as a surprise to the whole audience. And we were in a tiny little section of backstage in Spring Studio, and John Legend was going to present to his wife. And in setting up the whole show, I think we all had said, you know, Chrissy and John is going to be this moment of levity and laughs and humor. And it wasn't. It was completely emotional, because she got up on stage that night and she talked about being with her husband at the Time 100 Awards and not feeling worthy. And she got on stage for Women of the Year amongst, you know, Kamala Harris was a Woman of the Year that year, as were the Larry Nassau survivors, as were the Parkland girls. And she got up, and in a moment that we thought was going to be light, levity and laughter, was massively emotional. There wasn't a dry tear in the house, and she cried and was like, I now feel like I'm in the right room getting the right award. So she's been an amazing kind of part of the Glamour community. That's nice. Tyra Banks, I think we honored Tyra back in 2008, and it's interesting for me to watch. I don't know if anybody else saw this, but during lockdown in this previous year, there was a whole new generation of Gen Zers and young millennials that discovered Tyra Banks, because they can't remember which streaming service, but they put America, all the series of America's Next Top Model up. And I think it was interesting to watch this new generation of people discover Tyra. Again, massive, woman starting in fashion that has made so many pivots and so many done different trajectories in her career, not just staying, in front of the camera. She's become an entrepreneur. She's become a producer. She's become working on TV and lifestyle. And again, I think one of the threads that is common throughout the whole book is people not being defined by the first, job that they have, or first moment in the spotlight, that they push and they do more and they experiment and they try to be bigger and better. And I think we've got Rihanna. So we honored Rihanna back in 2009. And it was really, at the time, Rihanna was very, very much a musician. And we were also honoring her in her fight to speak out against domestic violence at the time. And what you've seen is with Rihanna is that she has gone from strength to strength. Rihanna has become the biggest, one of probably the biggest female entrepreneurs out there in the world of style and beauty, from her Fenty Beauty range to her fashion line. And she also, I think, has changed industries. When Fenty came out and they presented to the world kind of almost like the second coming of a man, all these different shades of foundation, what I think some of the bigger beauty brands who had those shades maybe in-house but never had marketed them or made a very public, here's the spectrum of the shades that we have. Rihanna changed that conversation massively, and she made everybody sit up and take notice. And that I think in the beauty industry, purpose over profit sometimes, your purpose and what you're doing can often drive profits. And I think with her brands, she's seen that come to fruition. Donatella Versace, we honored her in 2010, and I think she's a very interesting person, very interesting character. And she talks in this piece in particular about not even being able to have a moment to grieve her brother, and she had to step in and take over. And I think that story of her, who, Donatella obviously had started as a muse for her brother, and then in the time of crisis and grief, to immediately be stepping in as, as the head of creative for this iconic label. She did an amazing job. And I think when we honored her back in 2010, it was like she had taken the brand, and it was like, it had gone from strength to strength to strength. And I think she's an interesting story. And again, something that you'll see repeated in the book is people that are taking times of crisis and taking difficult circumstances and doing the very best that they can out of it, and ultimately learning so much from it. And then this is more recently. So last year, one of the honorees was the Guardians of Elmhurst. So last year was a very different year for Glamour Women of the Year. For a number of reasons. First of all, because we were all working from home, and shooting covers for Women of the Year is always difficult. It's always a big production, and to do it under COVID restrictions, with making sure that the people we were shooting, but also the team, felt very safe, was super important. Dolores Herta was one of the people we shot was one of the Women of the Year last year. So we made sure that happened out in the field with a photographer, many with a long lens, a long way away from her, because everybody wants to make sure that that 90-year-old activist is safe. So it was an interesting year of shooting for Women of the Year, but this for me stands out. Guardians of Elmhurst, and these are the 4 women that we picked to represent not only, you know, the vast majority of women who work in Elmhurst Hospital, which was the epicenter of COVID in New York, COVID treatment in New York, but really represent the 77% of healthcare workers that are women. And so for us, I went out to this shoot, and who you'll see here is the dean of the hospital, who's been, you know, practicing medicine for 50 years. The head of the cleaning staff, who was one of the most inspirational women, who prayed for and with the people that were there without family, often in the hospital when they were going through COVID treatment. The ICU nurse, who herself wrote letters to her family when she contracted COVID and was quite sick, and the head of the administration. And we did this photo shoot, went out to Elmhurst, I'm going to say September, and to see these women come together for this cover shoot with the most joy and appreciation and humor, I was blown away by them and their resilience and the love. And if you haven't read it, go read the story that Maddie Khan, who's an amazing culture director at Glamour, wrote about these women. And there are everyday heroes, and you'll see a lot of them in the book as well. I think that's the last one, so we have loads of time for questions.
Samantha, thank you so much. It's astounding to see these faces of these incredible women who have done so much to impact all of our lives on so many levels. And I have a lot of questions, and I know our audience does, and I'm going to ask them to type them either in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to them. Before we go to those, I would like to ask you, what is the nomination process? How do you select? How do you determine? You know, there's so many women that probably are deserving, but why, like, is someone being honored right now this year or at this, you know, moment in their career or lives?
It's a great question, and it's one I actually get asked a lot. And it's the one other part of the book that I forgot to mention up the top is that we actually go back to all the previous EICs, and they have written a piece for us about their experience in. So Cindy Levy, who was a editor-in-chief for 17 years before me, Bonnie Fuller is in there. And also, sadly, because Ruth Whitney is no longer with us, but her son wrote a piece for us. And he talks about his mother locking herself away in her room and personally calling all of the women that she was going to honor and asking them to be a Woman of the Year. The nomination process for us involves a lot of different parts. It involves the editorial team at Glamour. It involves a kind of a wider team at Condé that have input. And also we're bringing back this year something that kind of we're formalizing more, which is the Women of the Year Advisory Board. And this is past Women of the Year that get to share with us who we should be looking at. Because it's interesting, sometimes in the world of celebrity and style and beauty, we're very much in that world at Glamour, and we know it, and politics maybe. What is harder for us, it's harder to bubble up, and what we go out seeking and we ask people to suggest is the people in activism and community engagement. And, you know, one of our most successful and most kind of celebrated Women of the Year in 2018 was Betty Reed Saskin, this 89-year-old park ranger that you had never heard about, but she had lived 17 lives, and she was one of the most amazing, and she was a park ranger and 89-year-old Black woman. She was like, I need to be in these parks telling the story of Black women, because if I'm not here to tell their stories are going to be forgotten. And she was somebody that, for me, I think is somebody that works in the video team at Glamour, had gone to, I think, a small meeting and had seen this woman get up and speak. And she said, came back into the office the next day. And she said, this woman is a Woman of the Year. And none of us had ever heard of her before. So I think it's a mix of, we're constantly looking for people and we're bubbling up, and then we're asking the Glamour community. And when you go through the book and you see the people that have been honored in the past, and they are across science and politics and industry, and they're often coming to us and being like, this person you need to put on your radar. And I think every year we get, you know, we get it right? Like, and it's always an amazing mix across industries. Like last year, for example, it was the Guardians of Elmhurst, those women. It was Dolores Herta, who got Lifetime Achievement for 90 years. She had, from a very young age, from those of you that aren't familiar, had been fighting for farm workers' rights. Early days was like friends with Bobby Kennedy, and like making sure that these farmers were getting, you know, the rights that they should out in California. And she's 90 and we'd never honored her before. So we were excited. We had Regina King last year as well. We had Sherlyn Eiffel, who is the head of the Legal Defense Fund in the NAACP. And we also had Keisha Lance Bottoms, who for us represented the power of local mayors last year. And often the people, yes, they're representing what is happening with them, but there's kind of a bigger representation. So for us, Sherlyn represented the back fight for equality in especially around the time of George Floyd and the summer protests. Keisha Lance Bottoms for us represented, yes, the job she did in Atlanta, but really represented how we all spent last year, no matter what city or town you were in. You probably got to know your local politicians more than ever, and you understood the power of local politicians when something like COVID crisis happened. So it is a long process. We're already deep in looking at names for this year. So if anybody has any suggestions, send them my way.
Send them your way. I'm curious, has the criteria or the qualities in these women changed from its inception to today? And I'm curious, are there, you know, additional or different qualities that the Condé Nast family and the advisory board are looking for right now?
I think the nicest thing since Wody, when I looked back in those 30 years, and I looked back even from 1990, I think one of the things that made me proudest of working at Glamour is actually the diversity of people that we've always honored at Women of the Year. It isn't a recent thing. If you look back at the women, the mix of women that are honored since 1990, it has been very much a representation of America. And I think that is something we're super proud of. I think if I had to say something that has changed, I think there was probably, when you look at it, even in the profiles, much more of a reluctance of the women celebrating themselves. And you kind of, in early in the 90s. And I think, thankfully, we've come to a place where it's okay to celebrate your achievements and celebrate each other. And I think earlier, I think it was maybe a little, you can see when I read some of the profiles, there's almost like a reluctance of like being honored as a Woman of the Year. So I think that is one of the things. And for us, I think from the start as well, making sure it's cross-generational, because you're not only inspired by 50-year-old women, and you're not only inspired by 15-year-old girls. That has been really nice. So like, for example, Greta Thunberg was somebody that we honored. Malala, like the girls in the book are amazing. And I've had a lot of people come up to me recently and say, like, I'm buying this book for my daughters, or I'm getting it for me. And I was like, buy it for your sons. And I say that as an aunt. And I have two nephews that are in Sweden. And my sister reads them this book every night, and they call me and they're like, they're 6 and 5, they're like, we learned about Janelle Monáe last night. And so like, don't just buy this, don't just get this book for the women in your life, get it for the men, because that's the exciting thing to celebrate, and get it for your nephews and your sons. So I think that is something that I would recommend.
I can't think of a better bedtime story than
right?
Janae, Janelle Monáe. Fantastic. Which you talked a little bit about Greta Thunberg a few moments ago. One of our audience members, Candy, asks if there is an age minimum for the honorees.
There actually isn't. That's a great question, by the way. There hasn't been. So I'm trying to think of who the youngest. So like in the book, you'll see Malala. I think she must have been about 16 when we honored her. Greta. You'll also see the girls, the Parkland girls, that were, thrown into the world of gun activism. And I'm trying to think what the youngest person we have in there now. That is a good question. But no, there's no there's no upper or lower age limit involved.
Excellent. So type in your suggestions right now, everyone, right?
Yeah.
So also, I'm curious, what would you say is the quality or the qualities that you've observed in all of the women honored? What is the common denominator?
I think one of the common denominator is that they're not put off by fear. And what I mean by that is you see in the stories that none, when they talk about their journey and their path and their career and their life and their activism or their where they find themselves in world politics or industry, none of them are like, yeah, I just walked in and it was easy peasy. Like there's fear involved in a lot of them, and they take a jump and they take a leap and they take a risk. And I think that is one of the most exciting things that you see. And I think that is, for me, one of the biggest takeaways, that when you read these stories and you realize the people like Michelle Obama and like RBG, who you think are like just so chill, like they at some stage they were terrified of doing something that they thought was too big or too out of their comfort zone. And I think that is definitely a threat throughout.
Wonderful. Janelle, one of our audience members, asks, who are some of the earliest women recognized by the award?
Oh, that's a great question. So interesting. This is an interesting story, actually. Madonna in 1990 was one of the women honored, and she was photographed. And this is a very different time in publishing and a very different time. But they photoshopped out the gap in her teeth in the image. And I think she was not happy about it at the time. And it's so funny because when you look at that Ashley Graham shoot and when you look at the way the world of publishing has gone, we wouldn't dream in the world of publishing of like retouching somebody's like characteristics like that. So she was definitely one of the earliest people honored. We also had, there's a couple of sports women in there, basketball team, World Cup basketball team as well in the 90s. They're some of the ones that stand out. And also it's interesting, there's a lot of business women early in the 90s. So there's a lot of women that were kind of beating a path in academia and business that are honored.
Wonderful. I'm curious, having read or witnessed acceptance remarks, I'm curious if there was a speech that moved you the most.
Oh, oh, wow, that's great. Okay, so I have to say, and it's in the book, and I mentioned her earlier, there's a couple, but last year when Chanel Miller came out on stage and gave that poem, and the backstory to that was, 4 years previously, before I was EIC, the year before I became editor-in-chief, they had honored this girl that they didn't know who she was. And she was this unknown Jane Doe who was raped at Stanford. And it was her story. And what they did at Glamour Women of the Year that year is that they got Lena Dunham and other actresses to get up and read her victim impact statement and really kind of honor her in that way. What Glamour didn't know at the time was that Chanel was actually in the audience that night, and she sat in the back of the theater and cried as she saw these women getting up and taking a Glamour Women of the Year award as her as Jane Doe. And so we stayed in touch with her and we heard this story. And in 2019, she was about to release her book. And she's an amazing poet and illustrator. If any of you guys don't follow Chanel, she is phenomenal. And her book is amazing. And her illustrations are just amazing. And so we got in contact with her and we were like, we want you to come back on stage and we want you to come back and get your award and be there and be it in her name. And that definitely, oh my God, that moved me so much. Like I introduced her and I remember looking down in the audience in Lincoln Center. And as she was coming on stage, everybody just like stood up and gave her a standing ovation. And the poem is in the book and it is beautiful and powerful. So that's definitely one. I think we honored my first year, we honored Kamala Harris. And I always had my eye on Kamala as like maybe president in the making, but it turns out she was VP. And she got up in 2018 and talked about this moment of, you know, bringing people together. And then Shonda Rhimes, I have to say, she, we honored her in 2019 as well. And she got up and she was like, I don't want to see the table. I want to build a new table. And it was one of those things that like stays with you and you're like, yes, that was so good, so powerful. But there's countless, there's so many. We couldn't even get to the start of them in the book. But yeah, it was amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. Samantha, how did the book come about?
So, as I said, I was on a plane back in Christmas with all of my assistant had like literally, gone to the archives. And for those of you that ever dig into the archives, Ivan Shaw is this amazing man at Condé Nast who will get you into the archives and get you through everything and show you beautiful moments of history. And we love him, and he was definitely instrumental in making the book. But I had gone home with those pages and just was like so gripped. Came back, talked to my executive editor, and then we went and we had an offsite with all of the team early in January. And the interesting thing about the book for us is because we had in the previous year stopped monthly print, that we had focused all our energies on digital and print, and then to go back and be like, but we want something special. We want something that it'll last for a long time. That's a coffee table book. We want something so special for print. So we went and we talked to Ivan, who is the man behind most of Condé's books, whether that's a Vogue book or a GQ book. Ivan Shaw is around it. And we went to the publishers, Abrams, and and they loved it. And they were like, yes, when can we do it and how soon can we do it? And we launched it this year because we wanted to launch it on International Women's Day. And, but yeah, I feel like there's a lot of Mother's Day gifts being bought and lots of, International Women's Day, but we're really, really proud of it. And I think it is this beautiful archive of history of celebrating women. And Glamour was doing that before it became cool to celebrate. Like, a lot of people are like, Glamour's been like the OG original celebrator of women in an awards has been Glamour.
Yes, you have been doing it a very long time, and it's just nice that we all can, see the results of some of the work with the honor of these incredible women. We have a question from Kim in our audience, and this is probably going to be difficult, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've got to ask it. Which woman would you most want to spend time with, perhaps with a meal and wine?
That's a really good question. So who do I want to get drunk with and have, okay. Wow, that is a good one. I feel like in the book, I mean, like, I think I could put like a really good dinner party together with like Michelle Obama and like Chrissy Teigen. And then I might throw in Mary Robinson for me. I think, I would like maybe Greta there. I think we could throw the ultimate Glamour Women of the Year Christmas or dinner party. So I wouldn't want to rule any. I want a big long table.
That's a good party. That's a really good party. My goodness. I'm curious. So you do this every year. It's put out in this big way. All the press is talking about it. I'm curious if there have ever been comments on, oh, wow, that was a completely unexpected choice, or a choice that really surprised someone, or a choice that, how would I say, the Condé Nast family and the advisory board felt really strongly about. And, maybe it was just a little unconventional or a little bit out of the box, or out of the realm of what had been done prior.
Yeah, and this predates me, but one year they gave Woman of the Year to a man, and it was Bono. And it caused a lot, so they gave it to Bono because his charity had made this massive thing that like poverty is sexist, and that's just the reality. And they had this whole campaign about the sexism of poverty, and Bono led that. And so yeah, he got Woman of the Year, and he was a man. So there was definitely a lot of attention that year to Bono getting that. But I thought it was an amazing move, and I completely understood why they did that at the time, because he really had used his power and celebrity and platform to talk about women in particular, and in women in the lens of poverty.
Fiona, that is a shocking. That's a shocking. That's a shocker. Fiona asks, who is your personal unsung hero?
Oh, wow!
This teacher, and so in other words, someone
I do have a teacher
not featured in the book.
I have a teacher, and I surprised her on a television show at home, and she was my primary. So I had her at age 4, and I had her at age 11, and she was the teacher that put on every play, every musical, and she had, and still has, because she's the principal of the school now, and she's done it. She was, I think, was teaching me when she was about 22, and she's somebody that Mrs. O'Sullivan, and Mrs. O'Sullivan had such an impact on me. And I think she made it so easy for so many of these kids in Ballincollig in Cork, where I grew up, to like find their voice on stage, even if they were like the shepherd and they didn't have a line, like you still got the confidence. And it was so interesting for me because I got to repay a little bit of that. And she came to New York with her husband for the first time. And I brought her to Condé Nast, and I got like tickets to like the front row of Moulin Rouge. She made music. She was like, "This is the best night ever." And we were like, I don't know if for anybody on it who saw Moulin Rouge before COVID hit, but honestly, it's one of the most phenomenal Broadway shows I've ever seen. And to be able to take my musical teacher who put on these things on stage, and to take her and sit her front row at Moulin Rouge and Broadway was a very proud moment for me. So she's definitely one of my unsung heroes.
Thank you for sharing that. What a wonderful story. Donna asks if how many honorees there are per year.
Yeah, it's a great question, Donna. So it's usually around 8. Last year we did 6 because it was a different year. It was harder to shoot. So it's usually between 8 to 10. And again, sometimes depending if we have big groups, right? So some years we'll have groups, right, where I'm just trying to and that becomes more logistically normal to have 8 in that year if there's like one big group, because you're trying to get them to New York, you're trying to get them on stage. But yeah, usually 8 to 10.
Wonderful. And Samantha, what is the timeline on, putting the first group of names together, having discussions, having the advisory board, connect with your team, and approaching the nominees and us finding out who they are?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We've already started. We started, names are banding around, and I can see some of the names that we are thinking about that are in this chat. So I think we're all very much on the same page. Usually, so the event itself happens in November, and usually we will have the covers out probably late October. And so with that, we usually kind of work back by the end of the summer. We probably want most, if not, let's say there's 8. We probably want 6 of the people shot, interviewed, ready to go, because you've got to go through the process of putting the issues together, right? And you've got to do, and so usually when publishing is very quiet, which is August and everybody goes off to the Hamptons or whatever, Glamour, we are deep in like a shooting schedule, and we do end up shooting a lot of people, interviewing them a lot during the summer, because we ramp up then in the production and the fact checking and all of that in September. You'll see it in October, and the event happens in November.
Wonderful, wonderful. I am curious, in working on this initiative, what lesson have you personally learned from intersecting, studying, meeting all of these incredible people?
I think the thing I've learned is I think one of the things that I've learned is, like, I think as women, we're often maybe conditioned a little bit to think like, you know, your career is going to peak at 30 or 40, or, you know, this is your trajectory and this is where the peak of your creativity or your success is. And in this book, you can see that that's not true, that like people can have their best years at 60 and 70. And I think that is, for me, a lot of inspiration I got out of the book is like, it's not over till it's over, and you can continue reinventing yourself, and you continue pushing yourself, and you can continue to be the very best version of you for your community, for your family, for your, you know, career. I think that is definitely a message I took away from the book.
Do you think there will be other issues, like once there's another 50 years of them?
Yeah,
is it something that Glamour is planning on doing? I
think so. Like, I'm so proud of this, but I do think like I could see myself in another 5 years being like, okay, where's the next book? Where's the updated version? And keep the editions going.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have a lot of questions, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but we have a lot of questions about you, because you are so inspirational and have such an incredible career that we should do a whole program on, and I hope we can.
Oh yeah, I'll do it in person as well. We can do whatever. I can come visit.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to do that. But I'm wondering if right now, if you might answer a question that came in right at the top of the program, and that is, who is your inspiration, and how did you know you were going to do this in your life?
I didn't know that I was going to do this in my life, and I think I had spent my whole career previous to Glamour in newsrooms, and so I started in radio in RTE, which is the Irish broadcaster, overnight. At 2:00 in the morning when nobody else was listening and couldn't tell me, making a mistake. And because I started in radio, I brought that love of audio to Glamour. So we have a good few podcasts. And I think it's because I started as like a young reporter on radio. I worked in BBC World News in London as a television producer. So I put on TV. But while I was there, I was doing a lot, like, you know, in the background about digital and growth and Facebook and all of these things that were new and new tools for journalists. And I actually moved to the US in 2014 to head up social media for CNN. And that was my job. And it was an amazing front row seat to the 2016 election, at every debate, every convention. And I ran a global team from Hong Kong to London to New York. That was a 24-hour team of journalists on social media. And so I think when I got this job and this offer, I think some people were like, wait, who's this news person coming to run Glamour? But I wanted this opportunity. And I think Conde wanted me because I was a fresh set of eyes in terms of, I'd come from a digital and a TV background. I understood the power of storytelling, but also the strategy behind moving it into, you know, growing audiences and trying new things and experimenting. And I would like to think that's what I've done at Glamour. So I don't think if you told like 13-year-old me I'd be an editor-in-chief at Glamour, I think I would have started laughing and being like, stop messing with me. And you know, it's been an unexpected journey, and I've loved every minute of it. So I don't think I would ever have imagined, first of all, being in New York and then running this amazing women's brand. I'm very, very lucky.
Well, we are very lucky because not only are you doing such incredible work, but you also put this incredible book together to showcase these wonderful women. If any of you watching are interested in the book, you can see the link to purchase it is in the chat. Samantha, I want to thank you for joining us today and for your wit and wisdom and your huge talents. We are truly honored to have you with us. And I also want to thank our audience for their fantastic questions. And if you would like to know more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm David Zyla. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.